can do this. Surely all the 24 lodges of the current Illuminati franchises can do this. My mum even sings this. And it's a C to A minor. I know you got to see the brand new thing now. Come on, Vandy, do the locomotion. Show you how to rock and roll like Jesus did. Yeah, the rock that rolled. An F to a D minor. You know what to D major. It's on a good, powerful, uplifting. So come on, G, the locomotion with me. You gotta swing your hips down. Come on, baby. Look out, see, look down, G, and bend your hips now. Oh, everybody's doing my brand new cult creed. Come on, baby. Yep. I just wanted to make a few amendments to the last video or two I made up on Holocaust and on Zatanism. Brushed over a few things quickly without even kind of giving them proper consideration or time. So one was I said they all worship Luciferianism and Satanism as if they're the same thing, and I didn't really go into any definition on Luciferianism, which is something I really like. This world, despite how lovely and convenient and the coordinates of science and everything is worth so wonderful, and the bees and the butterflies, is something of a mistake. It wasn't meant to be made, and someone got in a lot of trouble for creating it. I think it was kind of like Brother Gunga, some sort of predator, but it doesn't really matter what I think. The thing is, this world was made and God wasn't happy about it. And God wasn't happy about it, and the hierarchy of God's angels obviously weren't happy about it either. Nobody was happy about it, the creation of this world, because they used human form. They used an ideal form, and then this ideal form is something like engraven images, and we're all going to be fighting and killing and maiming. That's what God said, like, oh no, there's going to be anonymity now and birth pangs. And birth pangs is my poetry, is the overcoming of human history, the cycles and regenerations. They crush a temple, they raise a temple, they build a temple, and they crush it, and birth pangs over and over and over again, trying to rebirth. Torah is all about the birth of nations, births of things. And Judaism, or the Israelites, were the pioneers. They went out into the desert, and they're like, fuck Egypt, man, we're going to do this on our own. And it's like LA and the stuff, people saying, we don't want our organization, we don't want our MTV, we don't want this anymore, we're going to go off and do it on our own. It's replanting a seed in fresh soil. It's the essence of Torah I just gave to you there. But they weren't happy about this perfect seed being planted in this kind of garden paradise, the world, Earth. And least happy of all was Lucifer, who was in the heart of God. I fell from the area of Bria, which is an extremely high and rare area to fall from. I'm not happy about it either. I remember being a child and saying, what the hell have I done to be put here? And a little voice over my shoulder told me, well, aren't you glad to be yourself? Meaning that I came from some state of absolute concordance to some state of individuality and separate, and an illusion of separatism. Which is in this world, religion means coming back together, but I don't even think it's a good thing in this life to be coming back together. I think you're supposed to be finding yourself on your own and moving out away from the idealisms of heavenly life, but one way or another, I don't know, no one really gets this right. But Lucifer wasn't happy, most of all. The heart wasn't happy. The heart of God wasn't happy about this. It was deeply troubled because he knew that all the turmoil, all the birth pangs that were ahead, all the blood, all the slaughter, all the abortion, all the everything, just destruction and vanity and all the things that lay ahead in the ideal form was just going to be bad. But God, his mind overall, his heart, and knew better and could see better, and Lucifer was like, we must destroy them all in mercy now, gracefully and dignifiedly, just destroy them all, just wipe them all out, just to save them from doing all this crap that's laid before them, all this deterministic fate. And God was like, no, I want to keep them alive. I see better times ahead for them, and I think they're going to get it together at some point, and it'll all be worth it in the end. And God's like, no, I see a finer future beyond your ephemerality, Lucifer. Lucifer challenged God. He's like, no, I don't agree. Because Lucifer disagreed. God's like, why? Tore his own heart out, ripped out his own heart, and threw it down to the world that was created as well. It's like, you go down there and you learn then, and you learn from them. Like all the dead souls that don't learn down there, they float around the fucking world as starry fucking stars. Or these what people fight over in the Illuminati. They're fighting over stars because they think it's immortality, and they think it's the actual way to permeated life. And it's not. It's the recycling centre. It's the pissy night sky. It's where you go to become a pillar of salt. A star will eventually explode. We know that the stars explode, and they become pillars of salt, space salt, floating around in the sky. And that's God's ephemerality trying to tell you something. Like sometimes you'll be like, no, don't do that or you'll end up like space dust. And people are like, what the fuck? What do you mean like space dust? But God's ephemerality is very hard to decipher sometimes. Like even birth pangs, I deciphered that. And it's not easy to decipher from the ephemerality of God's position. So Lucifer wanted to destroy all humanity and was sent down to earth to learn about our compassion and to learn about our dignity and overcoming and better times ahead. And so he's here trying to learn from us, but at the same time doesn't really like us. So that's where we also had a very mean and persecuting and domineering Lord from Judaic periods of life up until Christianity, when a compassion and a mercy was distributed. This is the other thing I skipped over, was sliced bread. I jumped onto the leaven wasn't allowed to be consumed up until around Christ, despite being the most natural and easily accessible form of food to feed our sorry asses. God asked, don't use the leaven. For some reason, he liked the leaven. We don't know why. He just said, don't eat the leaven. I know I'll do it in a video on the Ten Commandments, because the Ten Commandments are very diverse. Sometimes God will tell you to do something, to refrain from doing something very simple, like don't eat leaven. I'm like, but that's the most common food source. Like, why would he ask us not to eat leaven when we need to survive? And then he'd ask you to do something else, like don't boil a goat in the milk of its own mother, which is a very rare event and isn't likely to come about. But not as likely as bread is to come about. So commandments have different diversities, and God says them sometimes to say, would you do it if I told you not to, or would you do it just because I told you to do it? And there's a lot of very intelligent diversity in the Ten Commandments. There's a lower Ten Commandments and a higher Ten Commandments. There's a priestly decalogue and there's a common folk decalogue. Moses went to the top of the mountain, this is really funny, 3 times. And the first 2 times God gave him the same book of commandments. He starved for 40 days, he went up, he got it, the law of the commandments, he came back down, he said, he showed it to Aaron or whatever like that, and they're like, it doesn't even mention anything about killing, raping, or robbing in this, because God appreciated that that would be taken for granted. You wouldn't be killing, raping, and robbing. He just thought you wouldn't be. He thought that was common sense. So Moses went back up again. He's like, are you sure? And he starved for 40 days and 40 nights in the mountain. And God gave him the exact same 10 commandments again. They're not the 10 commandments, they're found in the Bible somewhere. They're known as the priestly decalogue, because the priests wouldn't kill, rape, or maim, or rob. They know better to do this. It's taken for granted. So the 3rd time Moses went up and he asked a different question. He said, right, we're not what the law, what you want for us. What's the law that we want for ourselves? And I was like, oh, don't kill, don't rape, don't maim, don't do all these things. Like, oh, that's better. But then there was also another 10 commandments of very strange priestly things, like not eating leaven and not wearing something on certain feast days and all this. So there's your commandments that are given unto you, what's best for you in yourselves, and then there's actually what God actually wants. But I kind of covered 2 of those in one now accidentally. Oh yeah, Lucifer still wanted to destroy the world and still is learning, but until Christianity happened, and then the mercy and compassion of Jesus was supposed to be dispersed like the sliced bread. It's holy bread. We're dispersing the metannery or the mind or the compassion or understanding of Jesus. So he's with you from a very young age. So when someone says to you, hey man, do you want to smoke this joint? Something inside you says, nah man, you know what? I think I'm okay. I'm not going to, or murder or any of these kind of things. Just like little inclinations now instilled inside of you, like an update, a Microsoft update to dissuade yourself from doing these kind of things through the virtue of the distribution of Christ. It's not even really the distribution of Christ. The Catholic Church that I'm grown up and raised in is the Apostolic Church. It's in our Nicene Creed, and that's the Church of Paul, the Apostle. It's not even the Church of Jesus, which might be Islam. I think Islam are the true descendants of Jesus, Joseph bloodline. I think Judaism is supposed to be the Shem line, when Noah got drunk and accidentally had sex with his own stars, his children, Shem and Ham. No, it wasn't Ham, Shem. One of them was Shem, and that's where the word Shemite or Semite comes from, because they're the bloodline of Shem, the daughter, or Ori, more so, of Noah. And then the Mandaeans claim to go back before the Shemite period. So we were only in the Apostolic Church, the Church of Paul the Apostle. Peter and Paul survived Jerusalem. No one else did. They rode with the blood up to their knees of the horses in Jerusalem. Everybody was killed out in Jerusalem. But Peter and Paul didn't. That's where fly away Peter, fly away Paul, come back Peter, come back Paul comes from. And Paul made it out to Greece the first time he returned. It was Nightmare, he went again. And he made it all the way to Italy, where the St. Paul's cathedral or something is, some massively ridiculous thing for some frightened gypsy that ran away from Jerusalem. I think Peter was crucified, and he chose to. This is a good one. I like this. Peter chose to be crucified upside down, and all these upside down crucifixes that people think is an inversion or a symbol of something unholy, and like death metal, or even Dawn French has a very humorous necklace she wears because it's slightly upended. It's like, oh well, if God accidentally, inspired some nun to make some jewelry, she accidentally made it some other way. She had a jumper of this as well, and it was slightly one side longer than the other, slightly upside down. When it's supposed to be blasphemy, and she's a Protestant, so she thought this was very funny. And she went to town and she had jewellery. Dawn French, she's a British comedian, on this notion of or silly, old, outdated notions. But upside down crucifix are very Christian, actually. They Peter didn't want to be crucified in the same manner that Jesus was crucified, and he asked to be crucified upside down, on an upside down crucifix, and he was crucified upside down. And so it's a very, very humble Christian symbol, an upside down crucifix, rather than a very anti-Christian symbol. So yeah, Paul's apostle. So we've got like a bit of Paul inside of us, I think it is, more so than Jesus, but Jesus was with Paul, so then the upgrade carries on, and we're supposed to have Jesus with us. Is the distribution. That's what the distribution is. And this distribution method has changed over the years. It's not as holy bread as it used to be, because Eminem's albums are distribution. Elvis's movies were distribution. They put these kids in the dipper and they put them back on top of the world, just like Little Richard told you. Put them in the dipper and then they put them back on the world, and then Lord can witness and demonstrate by his holy good God, Jehovah. He's talking about James Marshall Hendricks, of course, who was very possessed by holy powers when he played. You could see blue lights fluttering from his left hand. It was the wild blue angel he used to talk about. I get those a bit too sometimes. It's pretty cool. But they're all a lot more to do with John the Baptist and the John the Baptist line than it is to do with Jesus, because God said that those who believe in my son, this is going to turn your head upside down, because you all believe in an apostolic church. Jesus is an apostle. The Church of Jesus is an apostolic church. He was the apostle of John, who baptized Jesus. These are what the Mandaeans believe in. There's nothing really to do with Jesus. He knew his Torah very well, because he's actually a very wealthy young man, and John was the wandering hobo, hermit, weirdo, who ate locusts and honey in the forest. But God said those who believe in my son will live forever. And Jesus really believed in John. Jesus even said it. It's like, of none, John is the greatest. He stands between me and the Lord. He's no one is he deified John in a way. And because Jesus believed in John, rather than the other way around, Jesus believed in John, Jesus had eternal life. Jesus got a star for believing in John the Baptist. No one else believed in John the Baptist. They all thought he was a wandering, crazy, RZA, schizophrenic, kind of weirdo guy wandering around talking to himself. But it was those who believed in John got eternal life. And then we distributed the Apostolic Church of Christ, because we didn't want everybody getting their own orreries in the world being super flooded with super high destiny people. So we all just accepted into Jesus' star, the rock star, the star that didn't move, the star that was unwavering, the rock star, because it was there like a rock for 2,000 years. And John probably about the same. But I think John was a different case. I think John was actually immortal, and John lived on beyond Jesus, and through the immortality and faith of John preserved Jesus' life and the two criminals who were crucified on Calvary. Back then, he preserved both their lives, and that's why Jesus appeared to be raised from the dead, because he believed in John, so he was immortal as well. And then they witnessed Jesus, and they really thought that Jesus was some sort of deified angel, because he did live. He survived crucifixion. People say he raised from the dead and it was a spirit flow. No, he actually survived crucifixion. It took 3 days, the sign of Jonah. It took 3 days for the blood in his body to regenerate, because they bled him dry. They completely and utterly bled him dry, but he didn't die. He lived on. And so did John live on as well. And I think these people went off west, and they kept going west. They went to south of France. They had touches there. They came to Ireland. They spent some good times in Ireland. They had to leave Ireland, end up down in a fucking massive bombshell at Skellig Michael's, and he had to go west from there. A Saint Brennan had to go west from there, and in a little canoe, and he sailed all the way from there, got caught in a drift stream, and he survived all the way out till he reached Americas. And I'm pretty sure that was either John or Jesus that both survived and lived on to get out to America, and one of them learned to play guitar. And a young man called John, who told people to be good. Johnny, be good. who could play a guitar just like ringing a bell because he'd lived for so long. It's a pretty cool story, yeah? And I think I covered up those little two breaches. Distribution of things, distribution, like Rockefeller distribution these days is Jay-Z albums, and it gets into your kids' heads, and if it motivates you or inspires you in any sort of way whatsoever. John Todd talk about this distribution of holy bread with like Crosby, Stills and Nash albums. They used to bless them with virgin's blood on an altar dedicated to Zatan or something like this, and they distributed it. And this distribution is everywhere. I mean, it's in every product that you eat and use. They've just gone to town on holy bread. Distribution is in TV. Teletubbies was distribution for your kids. Everything is distribution of some sort of persuasion nowadays, which is all based in the original demonstration of the distribution of a name, distribution of a person, and the affectations that those names and distributions have on the person's life. So they can make you pretty corrupt and messed up and greedy and vulnerable to society, or like the Catholic Church originally wanted to do, was to instill some sort of goodness and compassion and hope in mankind, I suppose. I think they're not sure if they're still distributing or what the hell they're still doing. But Lucifer wanted to destroy the world. He's here till he learns the compassion. He might have already learned the good deeds and compassion through the sacrifice of Christ towards God. I'm very Luciferian in that sense, that I would wipe the face of this world absolutely bone dry in mercy, rather than let you continue living. I used to be a very merciful and compassionate and caring young man until this world started butt fucking and raping me and tormenting me and stalking me and hunting me. I've been stalked and hunted for 7 years. 2 suicide attempts. What's funny about this is they just destroyed my life and drove me from my family door, and they completely jobified me with Satanism until I was in a ditch on the side of the road, and they gave me the destiny or star of a traveller kid, some traveller man who was addicted to heroin, and I ended up addicted to heroin as well. But what's funny to me is, if it's good enough for me, it's good enough for your world. It's not my head on the plate, it's the world's head on the plate. If you put me on heroin and leave me to rot in a ditch on the side of the motorway, watch your world get addicted to heroin and rot on the side of motorways. Los Angeles, all the way out the west coast of America, where these people were fucking with me, came from. All of them now are all homeless, destroyed, lifeless, messed up on heroin, and you can fucking suck on it as far as I'm concerned. You get what you fucking good enough for me. You put me in this place and you get it. You treat me with a little dignity and respect, and I even know you might be treated with a little dignity and respect. I tell you, I'm not even going to bother getting too much into this. The angelic attention of this world is waning, and that's why things like stars are fading. And that's why things like disease and pestilence, plague are rising, to do with your starlight that's waning and disappearing. You have no idea the affectations and the necessities of starlight have on this world, and yours are just fucking messing with the stars to no limit and no extent. They're like childishly fighting and grubbing over these things all the time, just like bratty little spoiled rich kids, and they're brattily, spoiledly, and just tearing this entire world apart. It's happening so quick you don't even know what you're doing. It hasn't been real royalty or real people in the stars since like the 1600s. You're completely ephemeralized, and you have absolutely no idea what to do or how to handle this, and you're just fighting and grubbing along with the Illuminati. Anybody to get in on the situation. Pope even constantly is encouraging priests to take their lives on a regularly basis, to self-sacrifice, to Holocaust. Even abbots used to kill children so they'd have an orrery. And like this orrery science is just so bad and so misunderstood. Like it's very much like Scarface. You have a heaven, you have a seven. It's called Nexach. It's a mysterious feminine aspect, but it's your home. It's where you sleep. It's where you get to go to. It's like a personal heaven that everybody has. They can steal your personal heavens. They can leave you completely sleepless and completely ruined and completely tormented. But if you commit yourself to this life by, say, a sin, like killing somebody, like Tony Montana murdered someone at the beginning of beginning of the movie, you might realize that your life becomes suddenly very profitable, that everything in your life suddenly starts going very well, because you sacrificed your heaven, and all the glory of your heaven fell to earth, and you won't have a happy after story. And because you murdered or you did some completely unredeemable sin, a lot of your fortunes, higher fortunes, are just dumped back onto earth. And you may notice it's suddenly very profitable. It's like, wow, murder is a good thing. Bling, 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 bling. No, murder is not a good thing. You just sacrificed your heaven and you've got it dumped down onto earth, and you might suddenly feel like you're very profitable, like Tony Montana. As Tony Montana felt like he was very profitable after he'd murdered to escape the prison, which is our bad metaphysics. So you murder to escape the prison, and then you go off to be rich, and then you're told the world is yours, because that's it. You sacrificed your heaven and you made a choice for the world. So you'll have the world is yours, and that's where he ended up dead in a pool under the world, cut off from what was above. He ended dead and completely cut off and ruined. Because the world is yours. It's like a spiteful sentiment. It's not saying the whole world is gifted onto you. It's like, you suck, you can have the world is yours. And that's what happens to people. The world is yours. They think that they can kill and illuminatically slay children constantly as offerings or some sort of bullshit. And it's just, it appears, as beautifully and wonderfully and mechanically appears to be a good thing unto people who are willing to commit to it. And they do commit to it. It's almost like God designs this world for stupidity. That stupidity will destroy. Like the Bible really does make people or break people. There's a beautiful painting of this. I think it's French, no doubt. But there's a guy reading the Bible and he looks all angry and snide and sleevey, and he's got a sleevey in his partner there with him, like, yes, read this part, read this. And then there's a photo next to him of a man like looking very humble and holding his Bible and yes, and recanting gently. Because if you take things from the Bible and you use them, like all the murder rituals and all that are found in the Bible, and you use them, you'll end up just like the people that in that Bible. It's not a happy ending. If you know better and you just keep your Bible closed and you recant and you kind of talk and hymn and rejoice in the stories, it's either make or break. Luciferianism and the distribution of bread, distribution of his name, distribution of... Another thing about the distribution of Christ is this isn't the amazing grace that Americans think it is. The amazing grace of America is stupidity, that you are led to do things like murder and kill and sacrifice. And because you didn't know any better, you are graced amazingly so. And it really is amazing that you are graced. Until me, because I know better and I'm telling you now. So my information is practically a weapon and I'm going to spread it. And you do already know better. I know that they know better because I've already told them. So they have no excuse now for murder, killing and maiming. They thought they did, and they were amazingly graced because they didn't know any better. But now they do know better, so they're not going to be so amazingly graced. And that's suiting at the time that we're in, because Jesus was an amazing grace unto everybody. He was, as Mark said, the opiate for the world, that people could just do whatever they want, and because of the mercy that Christ had achieved, and we are all distributed with Christ's name, that we can all murder, rape, and kill and be forgiven. And there's a lot of dull illuminatic trends and funny games that go on the basis of potentially being redeemed through the mercy of Christ for going out and pointlessly murdering and maiming and killing. And it's not what you think it is. You're not getting off the hook. You're just taking appreciation and accepting it. And the grief will go away for a bit. What's really funny about that is it could be a messy cycle about murdering and killing and being redeemed. And they keep doing the same thing over and over again after they've done it once, and so weren't very sorry. But the mercy of God will slowly forgive them, and they'll start drifting back into being concessionals. I'm going to leave it there. I talked about too much. It's a 20-minute long video. Yeah, just leave it there. I'm not going to go into mercy of God for Illuminatic naysayers. Yep, any questions, just ask me anything you want. I'll answer anything as best I can. I'm not very inspired these days because I got my brain bleached in a psychiatric unit for being so clever. So I'm not as sharp as I used to be, but post.